So I'd like to officially welcome everyone to Stop Searching, Start Finding, Using Your Brain for Visual File Management. My name is Shelley Hayduck, and I'm co-hosting today's event with Matt Caton, our Director of Customer Solutions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
Today's topic is all about creating that unique context for all of your information. And before we dive into what we can do, let's talk a little bit about the history, where we are, where we came from, where we're going today. And it actually all started in 1886, if you can believe it, with Henry Brown, who invented the filing cabinet, a receptacle for storing paper. So that was very revolutionary at the time because there's really no place to put things, so you could retrieve them without hassle later. So you'd think we probably advanced from then. Of course, we've now digitized most of our stuff. We have filing systems, but the problem is that same hierarchy when I'm putting something into one folder, whether it's a piece of paper or file, whether I'm now doing it on that physical filing cabinet or even in the cloud with gigabytes of storage space accessed from literally everywhere, we're still utilizing that same hierarchical file system where something goes in one folder and then another and then another and then another. So what we've noticed is what tends to happen on clients' machines, especially large enterprise settings, is you develop these gargantuan file drives where you're sort of digging and randomly searching for stuff, and we're organizing by separation rather than connection. So we're going to offer you some alternatives to digging through large file hierarchies today. But before I do that, I'm going to let Matt say a few words. I know, Matt, you have a few opinions on this, I believe.
I do. I like to talk about filing cabinets. I'm actually in a conference room here today, and I am joined by a dinosaur over to my left. As you can see, it's a filing cabinet. You don't see those every day. I might be able to sell that on eBay. And if I were to look inside, I would probably see that it's full of actually recording equipment and supplies, office supplies, etc. There's no files in there. There's no documents. The only receptacle for storing paper in my office is a trash can. So we all try to live that paperless office lifestyle, and TheBrain really complements that goal. And that's what we're going to be covering today, how to not only just manage your information, but understand it better when you display it, store it, and access it from a brain. And of course, we've got files coming at us from all different directions, all different file types, different ways of storing them and accessing them. So we've got a lot of examples to share with you today, and you can pick and choose to decide what is going to work best for your environment.
All right, great. Well, with that, we're going to close our folders and open our brains, and I'm going to go ahead and get started in showing you. I'm just going to make my brain a little bigger here for everyone to see. And let's just go ahead and start at the top of this brain. And sorry if I'm clicking around, I'm just closing a few little hints that are popping up through GoToMeetings. Move that over there. All right, Matt, can you see the brain okay?
I can, yes, it looks great.
All right, so pieces of information in the brain are what we call thoughts, and a thought can represent any type of digital information. So as opposed to, having a file folder hierarchy, which has got, all kinds of information, all kinds of stuff here in your computer, what we have is a place where we can actually make connections. Now, just to kind of level set everyone, in the way the thoughts are organized, this is not to say that you cannot represent a hierarchy, because of course we do understand that categorizing and subcategorizing information is valuable. I mean, we can't just have a flat, completely matrix looking, well, actually some people do, but we still recommend a basic subcategorized structure. But so we'll talk about the similarities of what we can do that is similar to your file system, but where we vary. So just like I drill down a folder directory, I'm in my business thought. Now this could actually be a business folder, and when I click on clients, I'm drilling down that directory. So this would be almost equivalent to me going into a clients folder and looking at all my clients. So, I can go ahead and one of the nice things about the brain is you can organize information under many different categories. So if I go into client services and I want to see what we're doing for knowledge management, I can see I get access to all different files. So, but one of the things that's very cool about the brain is you can see that I've got all kinds of connections. So in knowledge management, I've got categories to all the key clients that I'm working with. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on, AT&T distance learning. And of course, you can see that I actually have a note attached to that, a document, and I can go ahead and continue to browse information. So if I want to go ahead and look at my AT&T distance learning project, I can do that. I can see who it's connected. But one of the advantages of the brain is that I can have one piece of information effectively located under multiple categories. So my distance learning project isn't just under AT&T, it's under knowledge management. And I also have a lateral connection to Ben, who is a manager who reports to Jerry Marvin, our knowledge management manager. So it's very easy to, when I'm not just accessing that particular project, so if I want to go back to, let's say my AT&T distant learning, or even just this client, and see what I have attached, and of course I've got URLs attached as well and all kinds of things, I can do that, but I get the greater context to all my information. Now, if you're doing a lot of file management, file projects, it's really nice to have your notes and your thought types and your tags on these documents. I'm just going to scoot over to my writing projects area. And again, you'll notice in this particular brain, my writing projects area it's categorized under many ways. I have a active projects section in this brain, which talks to me. I have links, archives to what I invested in 2018. I've got team meetings. So if you're taking meeting notes, you can do that in the brain. And I know we're talking about file management, but keep in mind the notes aspect of the brain is very powerful. We have a full text editor. So a lot of people don't feel the need to actually even create as many files and documents when they're using the brain, because you can actually just go in and my next, team meeting is this Friday. Of course, the brain has a built-in calendar, so I could go ahead and create a calendar item if I want. If I want to go ahead and, give that a timestamp. I'm on Pacific time here in Los Angeles. I can go ahead and do that. I can use all kinds of styles to format this. Or, of course, if I want to add an attachment and start creating a document, whether it be my PowerPoint presentation, an Excel spreadsheet, or a Word document, I can just actually go ahead and create and launch a document, initiate a file from that particular thought. So I'll just go ahead and do that just to kind of level set to show you how we can actually create documents as well as store and integrate them as well. So the visual files management in the brain is a complete workspace. So if you're just getting started on a new project, go ahead, create that note, start that file. If you have a bunch of files, we're going to cover a ton of importing options. So my agenda for this meeting is the following. And I'm just going to go ahead and save that. And that gets saved into the brain directory and the brain folder. And we can talk a little bit about that a little bit later on, where these things get saved. I can also save as well. But now you can see I have that note, and I also have that document attached to that particular thought. And what's nice about that is I can go ahead and make connections. Let's just go back to my writing projects. And let's say I'm thinking about this client presentation that I'm working on. It's a PowerPoint, but that relates back to my team meeting. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag it. I see my team meeting in my past thought list and make a connection to that file under my team meeting. So now what you can see is I'm sort of building a knowledge base and adding stuff to this area that makes sense. And maybe I want to actually add just a couple things to this team meeting area. I've actually got some information, a PDF on Generation Z marketing. I could create a separate thought for this meeting, which I might do, or I could just drag it here. So if I actually want to call this my March 2018 meeting, and of course I can give this a thought type. I actually have various types to archive. So what I actually want to do is I want to type this as a meeting. So that's going to give it that icon and color. And then I'm just going to go ahead and add that in the brain, and you'll see how that's developed. And I've got it as, and it's showing me that it's a thought type. And that's a new feature of the Brain 10. So I actually don't necessarily have to have this category, but that's getting into editing, and we can talk a little bit about that. But now what I can do for my meeting is I can get really specific and even carve out my final agenda, maybe in the notes section here. So I've just taken a note on this thought. But I'm going to go ahead and start adding documents. So I can do a couple things now. If I want to attach them all to this particular thought, I can have multiple thoughts. So if I want to take this Generation Z PDF and drag and drop it on this thought, that's going to connect it to the thought. Or I can create separate thoughts below for my files. So I'm going to do that. In this case, I'm going to create a separate thought. So I've just dragged and dropped this PDF. It's created a new thought in my brain. I'm going to do the same thing about growth potential of sports brands. I'm going to take this PDF and drag and drop this as a separate thought, and boom, I've got those as well. So now in this case, if I wanted to actually have this marketing plan on the thought, let me just drag another document on the actual thought so you can see just how easy it is to integrate things. Now, as far as dragging and dropping, I've set my options in the brain to what I drag and drop. It's actually creating a copy of moving that file. We'll also cover, you can actually adjust your settings so it moves the file into the brain. You can, if for whatever reason you don't want that information local to the brain, you can set the defaults in your preferences to go ahead and create it as a shortcut. But in my case, this is working for me. But what I want to show you is what these files actually look like. We actually have a great PDF and document viewer, and I can go ahead and adjust these panes too. So if it's really more about the document, and I just want to kind of make I'm going to adjust my font size to make it a little smaller here, so you can see. I can change the layout. A lot of people, and this is our new default now, like to really have the document sort of to the right-hand side. So now you can see that these documents that I have, just very easy to browse through and look at these files very nicely. I've got them under March meeting. If this is something that I'm going to be working on a new marketing white paper for, let's say, next generation customers. So I'll go ahead and I'll add that in my brain, and I've got the existing resources, but from there I can go ahead, and again, I'm just going to get started on that document. I'm just going to go ahead and I can start a publisher document. I can really have any type of file that I have registered on my computer will appear here, but in this case I'm going to go ahead and launch that Word document. So I'm just going to go ahead and start my white paper on consumer preferences. And I can go ahead and save that. I'll just go ahead and show you save as well. So this is the current folder. If I wanted to save as, in this case I'll just hit save. I could actually save it as version 2 or whatever and get multiple versions, and that's great, and I can show you all about that. But the other thing that's very cool about the brain is once you have something in your brain, you can go ahead and search and expand. So this is about a client I'm working for that has a sports brand. We're doing some brand marketing for them. So I'm actually going to go up to options and hit the search web and go out and launch a web search here. And so this is kind of interesting too, because of course files, we're talking about document management, but what we're really talking about is creating that comprehensive knowledge base across everything. So here's an interesting article on sports analysis and trends from Allied Market Research. It's a nice white paper. So I could do a couple things here in my brain. I might want to link that under this white paper for white paper research or under my meeting. In this case, I'm going to put it right under this white paper. So let me just reposition the browser so you can see how easy that is to do. So I'll just go ahead and drag and drop that. And now you can see that I've got that particular web page in my brain. And it's actually loaded pretty quickly here. So you can see how nice this is. This is actually very important because with a lot of customers, they actually purchase a lot of large analyst reports. And we had one consumer marketing products company that was actually wasting money. They were actually recommissioning the same reports in different divisions because nobody could find them because they were locked in folders. Oh, someone's trying to chat with me to purchase the report. Let me just click away from that. But this just gives you an idea of how I can leverage this. So this is a great article. Let me just make my brain a little bigger here so we can expand it. So I might want to actually go and put this under active projects or wherever it makes sense. And you see I've got my past thought list for this. So let me go back to, let's say, my business. And let's say this particular white paper, Next Generation Marketing, has implications for what we're doing in public relations in-house. I was researching it for a client, but this Next Generation Marketing paper. So I can go ahead and make a connection to that particular article. So now my Next Generation white paper is not only, it started as a project derived off a meeting that I'm having, but beyond that, it actually has implications for public relations and what I can do too. And this is where our search is very handy. If I want to go back to clients and just activate all my clients, I have a nonprofit client as well that has we're doing some marketing that can really benefit for what's going on from Generation Z. So if I just want to start typing in the first couple letters of Generation Z, I don't have to search through a bunch of folders. We all know how desktop searches works, whether you're on Mac OS or Microsoft. And so here, I've just got everything popping up. And so this is really interesting. There's the article that I'm writing about Generation Z. There's some Generation Z marketing strategies that somebody else added, which is also very cool. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and make that connection. So now this particular paper, this particular piece of information is leveraged across a lot of different aspects in my brain. And so that is the basics of file management as far as integrating web and file. The next step is integrating larger pieces of content, folders, as well as other data sources. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Matt.
And the very first thing that I want to share with everyone today is a feature that the typical file and folder structure simply can't do. And people had questions about setting up hierarchy or dependencies. And dependencies within the brain are kind of displayed within the structure of the links. Here you can see I clicked down through one of my clients, and down below I've got all of my active projects for that client. And this is my current focus, this all together now. Now, if I were storing this in a file and folder system, I would have files or folders and subfolders, etc. But some folders are more important than others. And how do I define that and say, hey, this is the folder that needs the most attention? Do I rename it or save it somewhere else as a separate folder? With the brain, I can click on a link between two thoughts and we can define their relationships. You're not only storing your files and information, you're giving it greater context. I am going to click again, so a double click on a link, and I can define the link properties or the link label. So in this case, it is simply my current focus. I'll go so far as to change the color for this link so it stands out in green, maybe even change the thickness so it's a little bolder than my other links. And now you can see in my brain, when I come to this client, I am clearly able to see that even though I've got multiple different projects going on with this client, my current focus is this all together now ad campaign that I'm putting together. So not even having to do with individual files, but giving greater context to the files and folders that are linked to one another, or in this case, files and thoughts. So I'm going to click on the thought for all together now, and I'm going to start bringing in some content. So now Shelley showed us we can bring in all different types of documents, Word, Excel, spreadsheets, etc. We've got a lot of questions about Outlook, so I'll be bringing those in as well. But first, I'm going to start with some of those online types of documents that we're all so familiar with. So, and of course, I'm referring to Google Drive, Dropbox, OneNote, Evernote. There are so many different ways to save your files online. And most of these are really just very hierarchical, very linear file storage systems. And I don't use them all. I've got a sample Google Drive, a sample Dropbox that I can share with you right now. I don't use them. I use TheBrain. That's how I store my information locally and online. But that doesn't prevent everyone else in the world from saying, well, I store it in Dropbox. I need to share this file with Matt, so I'm going to send him a Dropbox link. So now suddenly I'm using Dropbox. And I don't want to be, but it's been introduced to me. I was emailed or tweeted a link or what have you, and I've got a link to a file that's out there on some type of file storage system. The great thing about these is each individual file has a URL. So I'm not going to go through every example of Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, etc. I am simply going to open up my Google Drive account. So if you have Google Drive or Dropbox, when you're in the online interface, the web interface, you can typically right-click on an item and grab the shareable link. Those are the keywords that you're looking for. So I simply click here. I've got a PDF of a business expense. I click on shareable link that's been copied onto my clipboard. And in TheBrain, I'm on my all together now, I can right click and paste the web link. Now you can see it just names that document Google, but then it renames it really quickly. TheBrain looks a little bit at the metadata of what it is you're linking. And this document code was called 135C Caton. And so now I've got my business expense document right here in TheBrain. And if I click on that file, got all the file properties over on my right. And in this case, it's actually launching the web page, a Google Drive web page. It's launching that right there in the content window. So I've grabbed the URL, pasted it into my brain for access out to that file. Now also with some of these different online file storage systems, you've got a local directory that's being shared as well. So of course now I'm talking about well, Google Drive has the same thing, but Dropbox is notorious. You've got everything that goes in your Dropbox that gets synced. So there's a cloud version and a local version. And the cloud version is really no different than what Shelley has showed us so far. It's a local copy of all those files. I can drag and drop these right into TheBrain. So here's my Dropbox, everything I have in Dropbox. Here's my local copy. And I've got a materials research. I can click and drag right into TheBrain. And it's going to follow my brain settings for what happens on drag and drop. And I know Shelley highlighted this earlier and shared with you that you can set your brain up to link to files when you're using drag and drop, move files, or copy files. But I really want to highlight it one more time.
Great to cover. Yeah, somebody
Absolutely.
asked about, to dive in how we can actually do that in our preferences. Great.
Sure, it's so important to set up the brain that works best for your environment. So I use the defaults for web meetings, which when I did a drag and drop, the file was still there. I brought a copy into TheBrain. But if I'd prefer, I can click on options and go into preferences. If you're on a Mac, you would click on TheBrain and then preferences. And on the behavior tab, you can specify how you want TheBrain to behave for you in your environment. Do you want to move, drag and drop files, copy, or link? And so it's just a very, very easy setting to adjust, and your brain will then on drag and drop behave the way you want it to. That being said, you can still override those settings as well. So let's go back to my, there we go. And now let's say I've got this healthcare markets map that I want to bring into the brain. But in this case, I just want to link to the existing file. I don't need an internal attachment for whatever reason. Maybe someone else has access to this file. It's not done yet. And I click on Alt, drag and drop. And the Alt key on a Windows machine creates a shortcut. So we've got shortcuts that you can set up and modify on your own, whatever works best for you. So you can override those settings and create shortcuts to files from time to time versus internal attachments or moving files. Again, whatever works best for your environment. So I also want to share with you that we've got some many different import capabilities. You can import an entire folder structure. If you've got an existing folder, you want to get that into the brain, map that out really quickly. That's not a problem. I want to share another example of importing, and that's copying an outline and bringing that into the brain. So let's say this all together now company, they're a wood manufacturer, and they're doing some customer research on favorite wood types. And the reason why I picked this very random, bizarre topic is because I saw a file, an Excel spreadsheet that I had in that directory that covers this subject. It's wood research. And I'm going to open this up in Excel. Now, Excel is fantastic because we can really structure everything, as you can see, in different cells. And every column shift, that's a new subcategory of thoughts. So that's another layer of thoughts. And we can click down, down, down to create multiple levels of thought. So very quickly, I'm going to take this existing outline that I have. You can also do this with Word documents and even text files if you've got an existing outline of a project or a syllabus for a class you're working on. If it's properly formatted, so tab delineated in Word or a text-based document. Here in Excel, it's pretty straightforward with the different cells. I right-click on this content and copy. So that's on my clipboard. Back in the brain, I simply right-click and I paste text as outline, or paste text outline as thoughts, rather. So I right-click and paste, and here in just a moment, under this particular thought, I should have, it's just taking a second to refresh. There it is, wood species qualifications. That was the very first cell that I had in that document. Then I break it down into hardwoods and softwoods and cherry, oak versus walnut, and it goes on from there. There are also, I won't get into all the nitty gritty, but there's different characters that you can add to pre-populate notes or web attachments, etc. So if you want a really detailed example of all that you can do with importing outlines and Excel spreadsheets, send a note into support@thebrain.com and we'll send you a detailed breakdown. I won't spend the rest of the hour today going into all the different features you can add with importing. But as you can see, it's a great way to populate a brain very, very quickly. And we can export as well. So really quickly, again, you've developed this wonderful structure of a project that you're working on. Let me go all the way back up to, I'm actually going to jump into another category. Here's this reach out ad campaign. I've got subcategories, I've got sub-documents, there's a lot going on here. Maybe I even want to grab the entire customer here, Instant Dynamics and all of its children. Really quickly, I want to share with you. I'm going to control click on Instant Dynamics and it adds it to a selection box over on the left. I'm going to populate this selection box with all of the child thoughts in this area. So I click on Edit and select to, let me scroll down. There we go, select related thoughts. So child thoughts, we'll just say for 3 generations. I don't want to get too deep. You can see that even 3 generations down, I suddenly have 76 thoughts added to my selection box. And I click on File and Export. So this is a great feature if you've got a really fantastic brain for a project you're working on. You want to share it with the customer. You want to share it with your boss or your colleagues. They don't use the brain. You've got all of your files, all of your data, all of your notes. How can you get them this content? I can export it to a simple folder structure. So I select folders, and I've got the option to only select what I've added into my brain selection box. So I'm not taking the entire brain and putting it into a folder, just my selection box. And I'll export that, I think, on my, nope, and that's just because I had a special character in that file name, but that's fine. It still created the data. I can go over to my exports directory, and there it is, Instant Dynamics Corporation. I open it up. It's got all of the subcategories all together now. I open that up. It's going to have any attachments I have, 2019 expectations, folder called ideas, my notes for that thought, etc. So all of that content now available in a folder, very easily accessible by someone that doesn't use the brain. So I think that's important to share, that even though we're building these great brains, there's different ways to extract that data when needed as well. And I think one other very, very important feature to share with you today, particularly on the topic of file management and structuring files within your brain, is using one of our new features called the Brainbox. And the Brainbox is a really great way to add data and information very quickly into your brain, and then decide later how you want to categorize that data, where it actually goes. So every now and then we just get a file and we quickly need to say, oh, I need to review this later. But I don't want to have to launch the brain, navigate to the area of the project that I'm working on, create a new structure, what have you. I've got time to do that later. Let's just get it into the brain for now so I know to review it. So I've got some sample files here once again, and I'll open these up. So I'm going to go into my marketing directory. And let's say in marketing, I really need this schedules document to review later. I don't have time, again, to do it now. I'll send it to the brain and categorize it at a later date. So I simply right-click on this file and move down to Send to and select Brainbox. So this is the process for Windows users. I know there's a lot of Mac users on the call today. So for a Mac, you would actually need to have the brain open, not necessarily the correct brain, if you've got more than one brain database, but just the application running. And you can click and drag a file from your Finder window onto the brain icon in the dock. So for a little bit of a different process from Mac to Windows, the end result is still the same. I click on Brainbox. I've sent this schedules document over to my Brainbox. And now when I open the brain, I'm going to close my selection that I made earlier, and I'll navigate down to all together now. Here's where I need to work on those schedules that I remember earlier sending into my Brainbox. So this is my Brainbox button. I like to access the Brainbox from this icon here in the app. There's a few other ways or areas where the Brainbox is integrated, but this icon works great for me. I click on the icon, and here are all the different files or web pages or files that I've sent into the Brainbox. So there's my schedule. From here, I can create a new child thought. That's what I want to do, or link it to the thought that I'm currently on, or preview it. So I can launch it in its native application, and then the context window to allow you to delete, review, etc. There's a few features there. But for now, I'm simply creating a new thought, and it moves it out of my Brainbox, my quick collection of data, and creates a new thought. And this particular thought, you can see on the properties, I've got an internal attachment. It's my schedules document that I had previously sent into my Brainbox. And this Brainbox works also for web pages as well. You can easily send web content into your Brainbox. So that's something that we haven't talked about in too great a detail. I'm going to open up a browser window, and let's say I even want to send, I'm logged in as myself in the Brain, but here's the Brain homepage. And let's say I wanted to preserve the Brain homepage to do some navigating around through the Brain and send that into my Brainbox. So any URL, any web page that you happen to have open, you can, and any browser that you happen to use, you can install. It's either an extension or a bookmarklet. Different browsers have different names for them. And all of the instructions are on our website. We've got a special Brainbox website. Just go to the Brain and search for Brainbox in the search utility on our website, and find out how to install the Brainbox for your favorite browser. So with Google, I think it's on their extensions list. We were one of the top 10 extensions when the Brainbox was released. And I can simply click on this button for any web page. And hopefully you saw it. It flashed up really quickly and just said added and had some information about being added to my Brainbox. So once again, I'll come back to the Brain, and the Brainbox does require the ability to sync. It needs to gather this information that was sent from the web into the Brain. So you do need to have the Brain Pro combo or synchronization services for Brainbox to be functional. And I've synced my Brain, so now I can go into my Brainbox and see any web content. It hasn't showed up just yet, but I'll just leave this open for a moment. Oh, there, you just saw it pop in. So now I have my website that I recently added. Again, I can add this as a new thought. This web page already exists. My brain remembers. I've got this URL elsewhere in my brain. So I'll go ahead and close that.
And
so
Matt,
very
since you're
easy
on Brainbox,
yeah.
there were just a couple questions. Jocelyn was asking, when I click on that Brainbox icon at the top right of my brain, I get a message saying that the Brainbox is empty. Is there anything to set up before I can use it?
No, it's set up and it's just letting you know that, hey, there's nothing here yet. So go out to a web page and add a web page into your Brainbox, or actually go to a file, whether you're on Windows or Mac, add a file to your Brainbox and it will start showing up. Also on your Brain list, so I'm going to click to view my entire Brain list. Now my Brain list is, I've got a lot of different sample brains that I use, brains that I share with Shelly and other colleagues, etc. So I've got a lot of separate individual brain databases. But at the very bottom of your Brain list, you have a little button where you can open up your Brainbox, and it gives you this nice column, all the information that's there. And again, this would just say your Brainbox is empty if there's nothing there quite yet. So you can open up the Brainbox just as its own tab in the Brain's tabbed interface. So that's not an error message, just telling you that the Brainbox hasn't received anything yet, and you should certainly be able to start adding in some content. Absolutely. You can see I've got some filing to do on different subjects that interest me that I throw in from time to time.
And that's great too, because it takes a little pressure off you also. Like, you might just find an article online and, you don't have time to categorize. And, that's okay. We have a place for it. It's called your Brainbox. Just go ahead and put it in your Brainbox. Or a lot of people also have thoughts, where they call to read or what have you. And just a quick comment from David. He says, the Brainbox is the greatest feature you have added to the Brain in the last several years. For me, I read a lot of stuff on my iPhone and my tablet, and it is so easy to capture that. Just wanted to share my experience. Thank you, David, for sharing your experience. Glad you're enjoying that
Great,
feature.
thank you.
I like it too.
And this is another great feature of the Brainbox. I have, as you can see, I've got my phone. If you can see me on the camera, my phone is being reflected on the screen right now. So everything you're seeing on the phone image on the screen, that's what I'm looking at here on my phone. And the Brainbox synchronizes with your brains and therefore is available on your phone as well. And this is the final component that I really wanted to share with you today, is that everything that we do here on our local Brain, we can sync it to the cloud for online access or syncing between multiple devices. And in this case, I'm actually syncing and accessing my phone, and this is my personal phone right here on the screen. And all those files, all that data that I put into, there you can see I've got news flashes, breaking news flashes popping up on my phone. But regardless, I've got access to every file that I manage and keep track of in my pocket wherever I go. It's really an amazing concept, to the ability to take your Brain with you regardless of where you are, and can be even accessed offline as well. I downloaded a local copy of my Brain. So here, this is a recreational topic, but you notice I'm on a little area in my Brain about building cedar strip canoes, and I even have plans, so PDF files. It's a little slow on the screen, but it's just catching up. And I can click to one of my particular files. I'll let it click there in just a moment. And this is the Reflector app just being a little bit slow. But notice down below on the screen, you see a little paper clip, a note icon. So that's where I would access my notes, file attachments, etc. And it looks like my Reflector app isn't going to cooperate with me today. I'm on a thought now that has a PDF file attachment. And I just wanted to share with you, maybe it'll catch up in a moment, that I
You're
can
being
click.
very honest, Matt, because it's so hard to see your little thought. You could have said, yeah,
Oh,
it's there, no problem.
there it is. So I went to the brain, I went to a thought for my
Evidence.
canoe plans, and
Okay.
yeah, opened up. And so I can now click done and come right back to the brain. So any thought that has a file attachment, I can open it from my phone. And what I really wanted to share with you, and you can see on the screen down here, there's that Brainbox icon. So I can actually, oh, now it decides to catch up. But there's that Brainbox icon. So anything that goes into the Brainbox from my desktop gets synced to the cloud. I can put items into the Brainbox from my phone. I'm browsing. I see a web page that I like. I can add it to the Brainbox from my iPhone. So it's really, really just a great way to not only quickly capture information, but that information goes with me wherever I go. And that's the most important component of the sync aspect of the brain. Not only do you have online access, a secure backup if you ever lose your brain or lose your laptop computer, your brain is waiting for you online so you can download it again once you get the brain up and running. There you can see it's flashing a little bit to try and catch up. I'll go ahead and close this app now. It wasn't.
And actually, Matt, I'm glad you're touching on that because we do have a lot of questions about sync of files, you know, and how to use the brain as a backup, how to synchronize files, not just to your phone, but across multiple machines. So I don't know if now is a good time to cover that or.
Absolutely. And you can see my Reflector app was just not cooperating with me. But regardless, all of this information, yes, it's available online. So I have full, I'm sorry, that window, here, I can get it out of the way there. I have the ability to, and I fully trust, I've got no hesitation whatsoever. This is my eSolutions brain, and this is the brain that I use for a lot of demos. It's a sample business environment, has a lot of variety to it, and I can add and delete content. But it's an important brain for me because I use it for all my demos. I can actually delete this brain from my hard drive. I'm going to go back to my brain list and click on the little hamburger button and delete this local brain. It's very hard to accidentally delete a brain or content. So it's just verifying, yes, I want to delete that. And I have deleted my favorite demo brain from my local hard drive. But that brain is available online. I can scroll down. There's eSolutions Consulting. I can click and start downloading it again. If I don't want a local copy of it, I just want to visit that brain on the cloud. Here I've logged in to app.thebrain.com. You can visit our website, click on Login, and I click on eSolutions. Let's say I'm at a friend's desk. I'm traveling, I'm overseas, I'm at a internet cafe, but I need to look up a quick phone number for a client. I can simply log into the brain through the web interface, through the cloud. A lot of security is going on here too, and we could fill you in on that as well, whether you decide to make a brain publicly accessible or just keep it password protected. Very, very secure and encrypted data upload, storage, and download. So regardless, I've logged into my account and I can quickly click on clients and clients by industry. So this client is communications. There it is, Instant Dynamics. And notice I could have clicked down clients that are up for renewal, gold service level clients. Because I've got all these great connections, I can still find what it is I'm looking for. And there it is, Instant Dynamics Corporation. That thought or link type that I added earlier today, current focus on my altogether ad campaign. I can launch this thought, access the notes, access any of my active projects, look up phone numbers, etc. My brain is right there and accessible online. And all the files can be downloaded as well. So I can go to a thought with a file, simply download it, or even upload a new file. I click to upload or enter a new URL as an attachment to this brain.
And actually, Manel was asking about, well, a couple things. Two people, in addition to Manuel, were asking about collaborative brains, because I mentioned a little bit earlier how somebody else created that thought. So now that we're online in the cloud, that's through Team Brain Services, and we can get that set up. And then as a sort of adjunct question, Manuel also asked, well, can I just share a link from a brain, like just a URL, in Slack or, you know, a chat app. And yes,
Sure.
you can, because each thought has its own unique URL and thought identification. So yes, you can do that. The only issue is, if it's a public brain, it becomes really easy because then it's just a public URL. But the same token, I'm sure you're talking about collaborating on more confidential stuff. So yes, you can share that link. Just make sure that other person has access. How do they get access to your confidential stuff? Well, that's through TheBrain, and that's where I'll pass it back to you, Matt. And that's just kind of giving you some of the questions that are going on in the Q&A panel about sharing information in the context of file management.
Sure. So the brain that I just deleted locally, I'm re-downloading. So I jumped into another sample brain that I have. And this brain is a brain that we use collaboratively here in the office, just to show the capabilities of TheBrain and how multiple people can be editors on the same brain at the same time. So once again, I'm in a brain. This one is an apparel research development company. And if I click on online in the brain and open up brain access and sharing. Now, if brain access and sharing is grayed out for you, that simply means that you haven't synced this brain to the cloud yet. So step one, sync the brain to app.thebrain.com. Once you sync your brain, it's still only accessible by you. It's private, it's password protected. But now that I've synced, I can open up my brain access and sharing window. And as you can see, I've shared this brain with multiple users. So both Brigitte and Harlan are writers on this particular brain. Sean and Travis have read-only access. So I can decide who has access to this brain. And these are other people in my team, in my TheBrain group. Now, if let's say Shelly is not a member of this particular group that I'm sharing this brain with, but I know she uses the brain and I know she wants to see a copy of it, I can come down here and just simply add her email address. So I type in Shelly's email. And I click on invite. And the brain is actually sending her an invitation, letting her know the next time she logs in, she's going to have access to this specific brain. Now, she's not a TheBrain member, so she only has read-only access. I can only click on people that are TheBrain users, and I right-click, and I can make them a reader, writer, or even an administrator of this particular brain. So many different access levels. You, the owner, can decide who has access to that brain you create. Now, let's say Shelly doesn't use the brain. She's never heard of it. She wants to check it out, and she's new to this, but she doesn't have time to download the brain app and install and create an account, etc. Not a problem. I am going to remove Shelly from my little drop-down list. And this brain is publicly accessible. I'll get into some details there in just a moment, but I can simply email this URL out to Shelly, and she'll be able to open that online interface on the web that we were seeing earlier. So she doesn't even need to have the brain open. She doesn't even need to have a brain account. You make a brain publicly accessible. If they have the URL, then they can open it. If they don't have the URL, it's going to be pretty hard to find a brain online. This is not being indexed by Google or any search engine, so people can't stumble across a private brain. They have to have that unique URL in order to open the brain online. And when they do, they can't make any changes. So they can't modify any content or upload any attachments. They can access the attachments and download them and change them locally, but once they change them, they can't get them back into the brain. They've got read-only access. And more importantly, I can mark thoughts as private, and people that have just this URL will not be able to see or access a private thought. So I know Shelly is going to have this, this particular URL, but I want to keep all my active projects a little bit private. That's what's coming along in the future. She wants to know more about my company and what we've developed, but I'm going to save this for a future presentation. So I'm just going to click to open up the properties for this thought and click this little lock and resync. So I'll sync that out to the web. Shelly's got that URL. When she opens this brain, she's not going to see this active project thought, won't show up in any search results, etc.
All right, great. And we are coming on the hour. We have I want to cover search, and Paul and Corey and a couple of you have a number of really great questions on search. But before we do, I guess we're entering the Q&A. So we're going to do Q&A for another 10 minutes. If you can stay on, great. But for those of you that do have to drop off on the hour, we do have this recording, or we do have this webinar recorded, so you will be emailed a recording. Some of you are asking about creating a very basic brain from scratch. Today's session was all more about file management, diving in very deep to visual file management. If you're finding you want to kind of backtrack on the basics, join Matt specifically this Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern for the Brain 101. We cover building a brain from scratch. And somebody had a question earlier in the Q&A like, wow, this is pretty intensive. How do you create a brain from scratch? How long does it take? And I said, well, it doesn't really, it can even take, 20, 30 minutes if it's just a personal brain and you're starting on, your vacation to whatever, Hawaii, or just a basic brain for a new employee. Like, it doesn't have to be completely intricate and take weeks of your time. We are using more complex brains, shall I say, in this example, just because I know there's more advanced users on the call, and we really wanted to show you like an information-intensive use case. But that being said, for all the beginners on the call, join us. We have apps, and somebody was asking about a manual. We have a manual in the support section. We also have lots of great online tutorials. So just a little plug on that for the beginners and people who have hard stops. But back to search, Matt, Corey, and Paul wanted to talk a little bit about search and indexing. First, the most basic question is, do we search and index files? Answer to this, yes. And then secondly, do we search files outside of the brain? And yes, we can do that as well in the Brain 10. So Matt, I'll let you cover a little bit. We're telling you to stop searching, but we actually do have a fabulous search in the brain, so you can visually navigate or search to find information very quickly. So we'll go ahead and cover that now.
Absolutely, and I'm just going to find a random document here. Let's say I grab a file that I know has some content in it. So this Edgar Allan Poe, I'm going to bring this document in as a shortcut because I know that most of my brains have internal attachments. So maybe I should cover that first. If I do a search just for the word power, my search results come back, and first is any thought that contains the word power, and down below are any file attachments or notes that contain the word power. So here you can see each little paper clip that's a file attachment. It looks like these are PowerPoints, a couple of PDFs. That power is not showing up in the document name. It's actually in the document itself. And I can go safe plastic options. I can click, go right to that thought. That's on micro insoles, which we're researching for our yoga line of gear, et cetera. So I can go right to that content, a document that's internal in the brain that contains the word power. So now, like I said, I want to make sure I bring in a shortcut. So I'm going to go back to my folder, and there it is. And this Edgar Allan Poe document, I am just going to shift, drag and drop into the brain. Now the shift, actually that moved the file into the brain. I don't want to do that. So let's correct our mistake. Important to point out, you can always go back and edit and modify any mistakes or making changes to content. So I right click on the attachment and I want to move this file out of the brain. So I'm going to move it back out into desktop 2, marketing, maps. Say okay. So that file's been moved out of the brain. I should have held down the Alt key. That's the keyboard shortcut to create a link to a file. So look very carefully. The properties for this file is that it's a shortcut. It's out on my C drive, users, the brain, desktop, etc. But in Edgar Allan Poe, I have a feeling if I did a search for the word poetry, find out, yes, you can see in my search results, there's one external file attachment, and it exists in this Edgar Allan Poe document. So I can go right to this, this particular word. So your search results are always going to be broken down into actual thought matches. Also on that first category will be links if you're labeling your links or adding into anything into your brain timeline. Those events will show up there as well. The next grouping are all of your notes and internal attachments. And finally, there's a third grouping of search results in the dropdown that shows you all of your shortcuts, all external file attachments. So those are indexed and therefore showing up in your search results as well.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because in a way, you could just not categorize anything, use the Brainbox and the search. So it's so funny how much functionality, of course,
Yeah.
I love this software, you get because first of all, note-taking, we haven't covered that, but boom, you've got notes. So forget all the note products out there. You could literally use the brain, forget the visual interface, just the notes. Then you've got a web clipper type saving tool with Brainbox and, of course, search. So if you literally thought, hey, forget these thoughts, I hope you don't do that because organizing information by thoughts is amazing. But you could literally just collect a bunch of stuff in your Brainbox, use the brain's powerful search, and just be very, very, for lack of a better word, unambitious in your brain and get pretty far. So anyway, I just want to mention that to you guys. So if you're thinking, oh, wow, it's, to create all these networks of thoughts, it is very easy. It's a lot of fun, in my opinion. But, if things aren't placed correctly or you don't exactly know how to find something in a larger brain, you do have that powerful search. So a lot of people overlook that just because of the visual interface, but it is there and it is very powerful. Okay, and on to other topics. Jim was asking, do you have a version which can be installed on a company server, running on Microsoft server, not locally on your cloud or not locally on the desktop? So the answer to that is yes. We have TheBrain server that is deployed for a lot of our corporate clients who definitely want to just have it behind their firewall on their servers. And you have two options with TheBrain server. If you want your user community to have access to the desktop client, they can. That's good if you have field service reps and they want to be remote and have access to their brains, let's say while they're flying or in the field, troubleshooting, some equipment off-site. But that being said, you can also just set it up so they go to a local URL behind your firewall and collaborate online on the brain. So we can send you more information on that. And thanks for asking, Jim, on TheBrain. And then just to get back to a little bit on the behind the scenes with files, there's been a lot of questions, Matt, about do I have to store these files locally? What happens if they're shortcuts? So let's talk a little bit about where these files are stored in the brain and if they have to be stored locally for syncing and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, the choices are yours. Whatever works best for your environment. If you want internal attachments in your brain or copies of all the files, still internal attachments, but you've got the originals in its original location, wherever that was. And then finally, shortcuts, whatever works best for you. So we'll first talk about internal attachments. Every brain stores all of its data in a specific location. Even if you create multiple brains, I'll show you if I click on options and go into preferences, there is a system tab. So now we're getting a little bit behind the scenes. Where do all my internal attachments reside? You can see here on my systems tab, I've got on my C drive users a folder called TheBrain and then brains. And inside brains, there's a whole series of different user directories, brain directories, and inside there, thought directories. And all of your internal attachments are stored in those thought directories. They're not renamed, they're not compressed, they're zipped up in any way. So even if I didn't have my brain open and I say, oh, I need to find that Marriott contract, the client's walking down the hall right now, don't have the brain open, just do a search on my C drive, Marriott contract, I'll still be able to find the file that I'm looking for. So brain doesn't compress all of that data or rename it with a bunch of numbers for storage purposes at all. So I can still access that on my C drive. And the same is true on on a Mac OS as well. There's a directory being specified where all of your data goes. Now, I've got a brain that I'm thinking of putting up online, and I'm going to start collaborating. will everyone else on my team have access to the files that I've put in this brain? If I have put internal attachments, those get synced with the brain and are synced up to app.thebrain.com. I can log in there and download file attachments. I can sync the brain to multiple machines. When I go home this weekend and I need to get a little bit of extra work done, I'm logging in now on my MacBook and open the brain. I keep it in sync through app.thebrain.com. Internal file attachments are all there. When you have a shortcut, all you are syncing is the path. So here's my Edgar Allan Poe document, and I just have this path. When I sync it to the cloud is and I try and open this file, this Word document from the cloud, the server that the brain is hosted on is going to look on its C drive and users, the brain, desktop, desktop 2, marketing, etc. And most likely the file isn't there, let alone this full path. So you'll get a little pop-up message that says the file could not be found. The same is true if I sync this to the cloud and then download it from my Apple MacBook at home. I won't be able to access this file because it's just a shortcut. So that's just something to keep in mind. Shortcuts are not being synced. They're only accessible if the brain you're on or the system you're on has access to that path or to that location. Now, so I'm getting ready to sync this. How many shortcuts have I put into my brain that my colleagues won't have access to? For that, I'm going to run a report in the brain. So you can see that this particular brain has, let me get some windows out of the way, 363 thoughts, but I'm specifically doing a quick review, show me all of my attachments that are external. And you may have remembered, I mentioned this earlier, I very rarely have an external attachment, but guess what? More than I thought, I've got 6 external attachments. When I sync this brain to the cloud and give Shelly a link, she's not going to find the approved budget, the cycling pants, the Edgar Allan Poe, etc. So now I need to
forward to those files, Matt.
I better visit these files, and what do? I access that, or I activate that particular thought, and I simply right-click, and I can move this file or copy this file internally into the brain. So I can fix this, all of my external attachments, or delete them or review them, whatever I want to do before I sync this brain. So a lot that you can do to review all of your data. And we're even getting into now talking about collaboratively. Maybe Shelly wants to know, well, who created this thought? Who's working on this project? Each thought has its own history. So I can, I won't thought type it. I'll just open up the history for this thought. And you can see that I've been the only one working on it so far. But if people I'll come to a more interesting thought and look at its thought history, mostly me under 2 different accounts. But regardless, anytime someone makes a change to a thought, a particularly valuable feature in Team Brain, you can see who made that change, what they changed, when they made it, and specifically, specific details about when that change happened or how this thought has evolved, whether it's the notes, file attachments, or just the structure of the brain itself.
Great. And then kind of going the opposite direction, we had one question from Tom. If I create a thought within the brain, what is the best way to save to another folder, say My Documents instead of the default, or get the files out? So as easy as it is to put them in, it's just as easy to take them out. And you can also, in that case, it would be probably just storing it as a shortcut originally, or you can drag and drop a file. So we'll just, since we've covered moving files in, let's say you moved something in and you want it out, we'll just kind of go full circle on that and show you how easy that is too. Because in essence, we are an agnostic. For sync, we absolutely do recommend that you store those files locally. I mean, it's the only way we can get them up to our server and keep them safe for you. But that being said, we absolutely have a lot of users. Like for instance, I know corporate clients that have just a huge brain map of stuff on SharePoint or shared drives that it just becomes this visual guide to all their stuff. So if you can't store those files locally, that doesn't preclude you from visual file management. And in fact, we'll show you, how to take a file out or store it elsewhere outside the brain right now.
That's right. So I've got a file here, as you can see, this Safe Plastics document. And let's say, oh, I've got it in my brain. It's stored in context with the project that I'm working on. But maybe I've got this shared file folder over here that my boss is reviewing, and they want to review each document to make sure it's meeting legal standards, what have you. So let's bring a copy of that over into my maps directory that I happen to be on. With the thought activated, I'm looking at the properties or the tab for that file attachment. I can drag and drop out of the brain just as easily as I was dragging and dropping into the brain. So there, now I've got this copy of the safe plastics. And as you saw earlier, I can right click and say, move the file out. If I move something into my brain and my team is saying, hey, where's our team schedule that was out on the X drive? I moved it into the brain. I should move it back. I can right click on the attachment and select move file out of the brain and decide anywhere on my operating system or any place I have access to where I want it to go. So very easy to move individual files in, out of brain, change their properties or change their how they're associated with the thought in the brain. And for a larger group of thoughts, refer back to the example I shared earlier. I can actually export the entire brain into a file folder structure, or just a small individual portion of my brain into a file folder structure. So very, very simple to move files in and out of the application.
All right, great. And then somebody had a question about moving folders in the brain. So if I have a folder of maybe 2 or 3 documents, I just want to get that folder into my brain, or a larger folder. And there are a couple ways to do it. You can just link to that folder, and that's an example of what is your information strategy. The brain will work with you. You can create a shortcut to that folder, and that's where those documents will just stay outside of that, or you can actually import, and then the documents go internally for sync or whatever. So the choice is yours.
And if I just simply drag and drop a folder into the brain, it's going to be following my drag and drop specifications that I set earlier. So it creates a copy. So now I've got this folder copied into my brain. It's not visualizing the internal structure of the folder. I simply have an internal attachment. It's a folder, and I can double click to launch that folder and see all of its content inside. When you sync to the brain, or when you sync to the brain cloud, you're not syncing a folder though. So individual files on thoughts are the best way to go. The folders are not synced up to the cloud. It's important to keep that in mind.
Okay, and then Chip has a question. Can you tell attendees where they find previous webinar recordings? So they are on our site. Actually, thebrain.com/recordings is the shortcut, but we can take you to that area because there is a lot of great recordings. In fact, Omar Aziz, big thinker, internationally acclaimed human resources executive, just did a great webinar with us on personal journeys and so forth. So that's another good one. We have recorded 101s. So Matt's kind of showing you how to get to that. I guess that's in the About section, past in recording. So that is available.
And Omar is one of our big thinkers, and then recorded events you can go to as well for all of the recordings on specific topics. Project management, design, the Brain 202, showing you some advanced editing features. So a variety of different topics in our recording pages.
All right, great. And then some of you are wondering about processing power on your computer with a lot of files, as well as space on the cloud. So let's talk a little bit about that. The brain itself does not require a lot of processing power. It's more about what information you're putting into the brain. Can your desktop computer handle that? And then when you synchronize to the cloud, you get 30 gigabytes of file storage. And if you need more than that, you can just write into support, and we can actually, add additional storage to that. So it's really not a question of storage space. I guess the only issue is if you were to be some, movie producer and trying to actually synchronize like very large movie files or something. I mean, that's what Vimeo and YouTube and sites like that are for. That's the only time I've encountered, but actual basic file management is, let's say, Word docs and PDFs, things like this. Literally, you can have hundreds of thousands of those, in your cloud and on the cloud, and synchronize those, and they work pretty fine. And then the other aspect that somebody asked is, well, isn't that going to tax my, phone when I try and look at my brain on my phone? The answer to that is no, because it's not loading all that data on your phone. If you click on a thought and you want that particular file, it will make a call to our server so you can look at it, but it's not loading that data. So that's the advantage. You can sort of have your cake and eat it too. Get all your files up there, but at the same time, your phone is not going to be, you don't have to worry about your phone choking when you open your brain, due to all the data.
That's right. My brain, sounds odd to say, I know, I've got huge brains, but I do have a couple of very large digital brains, and I've got them on my phone. And if I'm traveling, I'm on the plane, there's no Wi-Fi, I can still get to my data, my phones, because I've looked at it ahead of time and downloaded the brain itself. And if there's a file attachment, I'm just sure to access that file attachment before I get on the plane so I can launch it from the Brain app. So I do have a local copy, but it's just a fantastic way to access all of your data that you've created from the iPhone and Android apps, which have just recently been updated. So if you haven't looked in a little while at iPhone and Android apps, there's some great links on our webpage as well that gives you further information, but you've got a direct link to the App Store, and can sign up even for our beta testing group, because it's in active development right now with new features coming out all the time. So very exciting recent development on both iOS and Android. If you haven't looked at it in a while, we've recently updated them so they're compatible with Brainbox, and they're working great. Android is working on Pi, the latest Android release. So great new development in that area of the brain.
All right, great. And then Bruce is asking how to output a thought map to an outline to create a paper.
Yes. So you want to take your brain, flatten it into an outline for a class, for a paper, for a project that you need to turn in. You saw earlier I was mass selecting groups of thoughts. So let's say I've got, I'm just going to go to Sports Zone. Let's say this is an idea for a new company that we're putting together, and I want to actually turn it in a document. Once again, I'm going to do this really quickly. Control-click to add a thought into my selection box. A Mac user would Command-click. And this was all recently covered in our Brain 202 class because it's more of an advanced feature. But I'm going to expand my selection box and say, select related thoughts for, we'll go 3 generations down, so nothing too crazy. Still 42 thoughts, that's a lot of content. I just want to save this as an outline, a text-based outline. I right-click in the selection box and copy as text outline. I can even copy as text outline with the notes and preserve the notes as well. In this case, I'm just going to say the text outline, and I like using Notepad++, so I'll open that up. Just create a new document here. And you can do this in Word, so you can reformat everything or even paste into Excel. But it's on my clipboard right now. So all I have to do is hit Control-V or right-click and paste. And there it is. And it preserved the structure of the relationship. So Sports Zone had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 9 children. There they are, 2019 schedule, campaign, their children. And even here, track shoes went down a few generations deep into track shoes. And I only went 3 generations. If I would have gone 4, this would have been even larger. But now I've got a quick outline that I can review in a team meeting, submit in a document or proposal, what have you.
All right, great. And lots of good questions. I think we're going to have to close the session, but I want to thank everyone for their time. Just a couple more. There's just one more question that's quite interesting that reminds me of talking about images and thought icons as part of file management. Like Jocelyn was asking, is there a way to take a snapshot of the web page? She is working in publishing and would like to keep images of what is submitted. Now, first of all, and this is what I love, because I won't mention the name of another software program. I deliberately started using it, and I realized it wasn't taking the live web pages, it was just copying them, and actually I don't like that. So just to be clear and upfront, when you drag and drop a web page or you go into Brainbox on your phone, you're collecting web pages, it is the live site. Personally, I like that because, if CNN updates, they've made a mistake in the article, they'll publish an update or whatever. Now, that being said, if you want a static image, you can copy and paste into notes for web pages. That's one way to do it. And then, of course, if you're in design and you kind of want to snapshot things, there's a really cool screen grabber that can be used to make these zoomable icons on your notes that we can kind of show you. That is pretty cool as well. And that's just a little bit on how to actually add an image, and that's used for tech support people who want to take screen grabs of issues on screens, product designers who want to grab areas of the product they're designing on their desktop, or just, images of, your next vacation. So it's a nice little trick, if you will.
Yeah, so I've got an image on the background. Let's say I'm developing an Android app for this particular client, and I just want a zoomable icon. It's like Shelley said, if you're in design, sometimes you see an image online you really like and you want to capture it. I just happen to have an image open. It's got the little Android guy there. And so I think this might work for a little project that we're putting together. With that window open in the background from the brain, I can right click on a thought and select to capture image. So when I select that, the brain minimizes, and hopefully you can see this on your end. I've got this red crosshair on the screen. And so I can select part of an image. Let's say I want to come way out the box and get this floating window. So I get the drop shadow behind it. That's the image I want. And that is now the zoomable icon for that thought. If I don't like it, I right click again and select capture image, and I'll simply overwrite the zoomable image that I have for this particular thought. So a really, really great screen capture capability or feature built right into the brain. I can also just click on a thought to open up its thought properties. And there will be a frame over here. If I don't have an image, I can delete that icon, that zoomable icon I have. Click there again, and I can select a stock icon. So the brain has a built-in library of well over 1,000 different icons. If I just want this little weight barbell image, I select that, and that's my tiny little image that I have for that thought. And I love these. Shelley and I both use them. Everybody in the office uses them. Everybody we know that uses the brain uses these icons because it's just that nice visual. Here I can see right away the swimming gear got the red light, whereas track shoes got the green light. One was approved, one wasn't. I don't have to open a contract to read that. I don't have to review people's notes and feedback. I simply set up an icon of a red light and a green light, and I know which project got approved and is moving forward. So that nice visual icon connected to a thought from time to time is, again, just another great way to add greater context to your files and folders that you can't do from any other type of file and folder system, operating system.
And you can also just copy and paste a web image, like if you were to do a web search on like painted lady butterflies, which are inundating California right now, for instance, and you like the image, copy as thought icon, paste, and boom, you've got just a nice image of a butterfly. So there's also kind of, and by the way, these are like fun little tips and tricks we cover in Matt's 101 class. I can't plug that class enough. But, again, so you just copy that and paste this thought image just to show you like how a bigger image would look.
Now, I only copied that one little square, but if I were to click and go full screen, it would go full screen here in the brain as well. So the zoomable icon can be not only fun to use, but sometimes it's really important. I've got instructions on how to reboot a server. You need to click the third button down or the snip the red wire. Well, it's really helpful to have a picture snip the red wire. That sounds like I'm a spy defusing a bomb, but regardless, those pictures that can go along with instructions or manuals from time to time are particularly helpful.
All right, and I think we've covered a lot of ground. And obviously, there's so much more to cover. Browse through our tutorials. We do offer free support to all users, live human beings right at the Brain office, so you can chat in to our website, email us. Some of you were, I know Chip was having some questions about upgrading to version 10. No problem, Chip. We'll get you squared away. And then somebody else was asking, Carrie's asking a few more advanced questions about linking URLs from brains to brains. Carrie, we're happy to help you out, today, right at, on support, so you can jump on a chat with an agent right after this webinar if you like, at your convenience. And then we've got the 101. In a couple weeks in April, we also have a new webinar on visual thinking and creativity. So I think with that, we'll pull that up. Those are all available on our homepage. So that's our next webinar, our next new topic webinar and upcoming events, visual storytelling. And on that webinar, you'll get to see Matt's Shakespeare brain and my story brain. But for now, I think we're going to close the session. Before we do, Matt, any final words of wisdom or anything else you'd like to share on visual file management for the troopers that are still here? And we have a lot of you since we're running 30 minutes into overtime. We appreciate all your time and great questions to everyone. I think that's why we did go so into overtime, because just a lot of great questions and comments on the panel today. I want to thank everyone, call out everyone for that. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for joining us. It's important to remember there's no right or wrong way to get information into your brain. You can always go back and modify, categorize, and draw those extra relationships or change relationships at a later date. So get that information into the brain, and you'll really quickly start seeing how you can add all of that greater context to your data over a file and folder storage system. And of course, you can always contact us at support@thebrain.com if you have any further questions.
All right. Well, without further ado, you got to stop searching, start finding, close those folders, open your digital brains, and I wish everyone well. Hope to see you on future brain technology web events. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.